Hey there, folks. This is DMC Jedi Man, and I'm coming to you with another review. Now, this is the spoiler full review, so if you have not seen Ghostbusters Afterlife yet, what are you waiting for, first off? Second off, if you haven't seen it yet and you do not want to be spoiled, then turn this review off. Maybe bookmark it so you can come back to it if you want, but turn it off. Wait till you've seen the movie, then rejoin me. But for those of you joining me who do want to press forward, for those in the know, I'm a pretty big Ghostbusters fan. I went to see Ghostbusters Afterlife last night, opening night, first showing. It was a phenomenal experience, and I did a spoiler-free review when I got back from the theater. If you want, you can check that out if you don't want the spoiler version. But for those of you who do want the spoiler version, want to hear my full thoughts on everything, then I think we should go ahead and take care of this. You know, don't forget, if you like my content, to like and subscribe and keep your eyes peeled for whatever I have coming down the pipeline next. So let's get on into this, shall we? So the movie starts out with the farmhouse that we've all seen in the trailer, and Egon is trying. Well, actually, it doesn't start at the farmhouse. It starts at the Shandor mine. What am I saying? Starts at the Shandor mine with Egon trying to escape with one of the terror dogs. He's trapped it. He's trying to prevent the apocalypse. He manages to make it to the farmhouse in spite of the other terror dog body slamming his truck. He makes it into the firehouse, tries to trap the other one, but, there's a glitch in the system and the traps don't activate, so he retreats into the farmhouse. And Egon Spengler is killed by the terror dog. So first few minutes of the movie, and Egon has died. Before his death, though, he manages to hide the trap containing the one terror dog he was able to capture into the floor of the farmhouse. But yeah, Egon passes on, and it's revealed pretty quickly that his presence is not leaving. But, then we cut to a family that's arriving in Somerville, and this family consists of Callie Spengler, Egon's daughter, played by Carrie Coon, and her two children, Phoebe, played by McKenna Grace, and Trevor, played by Finn Wolfhard. So they arrive in Somerville because, Egon was their grandfather, and the only thing he left them was the farmhouse, and they've just been evicted from where they lived before, so they have no choice but to kind of move out there and move in. So none of them really want to be in Somerville at first, though Trevor quickly falls for a girl working at a local diner, that being Lucky, played by Celeste O'Connor. So, right off the bat, Phoebe, you can tell that she's of Egon's blood. I mean, even before the big reveal comes later, there's clues all over the place of who this family is, particularly with her. Also, I should note that there's a lot of great musical cues here. There's a lot of music straight from the original 1984, and lots of callbacks. At the farmhouse, we actually get our first old cast member returning, Janine Melnitz, once again played by Annie Potts, who goes into a little detail about how, they could barely keep the power on, and that, the person left the family a lot of debt. Again, they do not reveal the name. Name reveal isn't until later, but like I said, we all kind of could tell. So Phoebe ends up enrolling in the school there, or summer school, I think it is, and her teacher is Gary Gruberson, played by uh, Paul Rudd. I wanted to say Scott Lang. It's like, no, that's the character he played in a different movie. But yeah, and Mr. Gruberson, he's a science teacher, and he he has a weird habit of showing R-rated horror movies to his students. He shows them Cujo and he shows them Child's Play. It's like, what are you doing, man? I mean, they're good movies, don't get me wrong, but you don't really show those to kids. But anyway, he and Phoebe, they start bonding a bit, because she, reveals that, she's hyper intelligent, so he has somebody, to talk to. We also get introduced to Podcast, played by Logan Kim. And, he's a true believer in the supernatural and whatnot, I mean, if I were to break down the four characters right now, I would say that obviously Phoebe's the brains, the Egon. Uh, Podcast would be what I'd consider the heart, the Ray of the group. Uh, Honestly, I think uh, that Lucky is actually the mouth of the group. Like she fills more of the Venkman role than the Winston role here. Even though she is of the same ethnicity that Winston was. The fact is, I I see her more as the Peter of the group. Because Trevor seems to be more of like the everyman, which is what the role Winston fulfilled. So anyway, so that's our four, our new generation, if you will. So Phoebe starts to communicate with a presence in the farmhouse, and it's, using flickering lights and, moving chess pieces around. And Phoebe eventually finds a PKE meter, which she uses to follow the presence and the lights, which lead her to a few other discoveries, among them a proton pack, and she finds the hidden ghost trap in the floorboards. And I will say, a cool thing about Phoebe is the whole movie she's making these awesome to awful jokes. I actually heard one of my new favorite jokes from this movie. It basically goes something like this, what do a hamster and a cigarette have in common? They're both harmless until you light them on fire and put them in your mouth. I thought that joke was hilarious. Anyway, though, so Phoebe finds the ghost trap, still containing the terror dog that Egon had captured at the beginning of the movie. So they she brings it to school, and her and Podcast are trying to open this thing. They are trying, they're failing, and Mr. Gruberson, he's like, "Oh, cool, replica," and they're like, "Replica of what?" Apparently, they had no knowledge of the Ghostbusters previously existing. Of course, Mr. Gruberson shows them, a a clip of the Ghostbusters and explains, that they saved the world back in '84. Doesn't really go into any details of the events of Ghostbusters 2, and that's one of the few failings of this movie, is that it feels like Ghostbusters 2 is largely forgotten. I mean, don't get me wrong, there is one really nice callback to Ghostbusters 2 in here, but I just wish they had acknowledged that movie a little more in this one. I'll get into that a little later. But so, they, Mr. Gruberson, decides to help them open the trap up, which they do open it in the school bus parking lot, I think it was, and release the terror dog, which blows right out of there and goes right back to the mine. Meanwhile, while this is all going on, Trevor has gotten a job at that local cafe in an attempt to be a lot closer to Lucky, and they start hitting it off, and he starts hanging out with her and her friends, and they, they take a trip up to the Shandor mine. Yes, I said the Shandor mine, because the mine was owned by the Shandor family. It was actually used to mine the selenium, which was used to construct the Dana Barrett's apartment building from the original film. So while there, they see some strange things going on. Of course, they don't know who to call yet. Anyway, though, so we start getting some more chemistry between Lucky and Trevor. And I should note, Trevor made his own little discovery. In a barn, he has discovered the Ecto-1, and he's been working on getting it fixed up, and he finally succeeds in getting it, all repaired, starts it up, well, actually, I should say he mostly succeeds. Egon reconnects one wire he apparently didn't get done, but the Ecto-1's back up and running. And Trevor takes it out for a little joyride, doing his best Dukes of Hazzard impression with the car. Meanwhile, Mr. Gruberson has brought, Phoebe home, and Podcast is tagged along, and Mr. Gruberson, starts hitting it off with Phoebe's mom, Callie, and they end up going out on a date. Phoebe, gets the proton pack up and running and tests it out, in a nice little scene, getting to see some of that. And we even get to see a new function for the Ecto goggles, which have shown up. They actually have a photograph function. So they go to this, I think it was like some sort of a factory or something, where they come across their first ghost, the Muncher. Now, the Muncher is kind of the Slimer of the movie, and they attempt to catch the Muncher, which eats metal. And the Muncher, he's able to avoid getting captured at the beginning, and they end up, they meet up with Trevor and, get into the Ecto-1 and start, they go into town and track down where the Muncher is. The Ecto-1 shows off a couple new features at this point. The RTV, remote trap vehicle, I think that's what that stands for. And it reveals that the Ecto-1 has a gunner seat that pops out of the side. So they attempt to, they go blasting through the town, causing, lots of property damage, interrupting the date between, Mr. Gruberson and Callie. They do eventually catch the Muncher, with a little collateral damage to the Ecto-1's gunner seat door, but thankfully, that can be repaired. And when on their way back, they get captured by the police and thrown in jail. Turns out that Lucky's father is actually the guy in charge of the jail, and Phoebe uses her one phone call to call Ray Stans at Ray's Occult Books, tells him about Egon's death, because at this point, she's discovered that Egon is her grandfather. I may have skipped over that a little earlier. I've only seen the film once, so bear with me. I'm doing this as best I can from memory. I didn't go looking for a cheat sheet of like, oh, this happened and this happened. The only thing I did do is I pulled up a cast list because I wanted to be able, I was saying the names and actors and actresses correctly. So anyway, though, Phoebe and Ray talk for a while on the phone, though. We get a little history that, Egon started fearing, well, first off, the busting business started drying up a bit, and then Egon started saying that the world was going to end, and the busters didn't really listen to him, so he stole all the suits and all the tech and the Ecto-1 and just jutted out to the farmhouse in order to prepare. And you can tell that it weighs heavily on Dan Aykroyd here. I don't think all of it was acting. I think some of his, sad emotions come from the fact that we lost Harold Ramis back in 2014. You know, uh, so the Mr. Gruberson and the mom show up and bring him back home from the jail. Though the people at the jail, they keep all of the equipment in the Ecto. So meanwhile, while this is going on, the gatekeeper and the keymaster awaken and set out to find their hosts. Now, since we're in, the part where it generally happens, there's a bit of a fight between Phoebe and the mom, and they both run off their separate ways. And the mom actually discovers the secret, basement laboratory. There's some wonderful callbacks in there, particularly Egon's collection of spores, molds, and funguses. And, you know, we get this awesome revelation that he did love his daughter, that he's got this whole shrine, he'd been keeping track of her whole life, even though he couldn't actually be there with her. It's really touching. Of course, heartfelt emotions don't really bother terror dogs, and thus the gatekeeper shows up to possess Callie Spengler. Meanwhile, Mr. Gruberson is in a Walmart and discovers some odd things. First off, a wonderful little segment with these little mini puffs. They're they're so cute and so demented at the same time. Like it's so fun. Like they're skewering each other, they're blending each other up, they're roasting each other. One of them, when he's burning, he does the thumbs up thing from Terminator 2. It's so fun. And then Mr. Gruberson discovers that there's a terror dog in there, specifically the Keymaster terror dog, Vince Clorfo. So after a brief chase, through the Walmart and out to his car, the terror dog does possess him. Meanwhile, the kids, they all go up to the Shandor mine to find out, to start looking for some clues. And they discover in there that the mine actually has a temple to Gozer, as well as a in stasis, I'm gonna say, the in stasis body of Evo Shandor himself, played wonderfully by J.K. Simmons. Now, I didn't quite get if he was dead or just in stasis, but I'm gonna go with in stasis because that's what makes the most sense to me. So, and they discover that all the proton packs that Egon took, he's got them set up to push down this ghost portal that's supposed to open, which has been causing the earthquakes throughout town, which I kind of forgot to mention earlier, that the town is got seismic activity happening, even though there's no fault lines and no volcanoes in the area. So, like I said, they discover this, and there's dates on the walls that talk about other things. Like there's and one of these is a bit of a mistake, I think, because they have the year 1908, which they claim is the year of the Tunguska blast, but I'm pretty sure they said 1909 in the original Ghostbusters. So that's, I guess, one flub they did have. But they have the Philadelphia mass turbulence year. They've got 1984, the year of the actual original Ghostbusters. Oddly enough, I did not see 1989 mentioned there. So once again, no love for Ghostbusters 2 there. But, the last year on that little countdown to Doomsday is 2021. Though, considering this movie was supposed to come out, a year ago, I find that a little creepy that we almost had our own Doomsday in the year that would have been up there. Because I'm sure they had to do some digital scrubbing and editing to make that into 2021 instead of 2020. So anyway, though, so they rush back to the farmhouse where they find that Callie's been possessed by Zool, and there's a great callback to Dana's line where they're like, "Mom, Mom," and it's like, "There is no mom, only Zool." And of course, she runs out of there, and ends up hooking up with Mr. Gruberson near the mine. So the kids have to figure out, how to tackle the problem. So they go to the jail to try and retrieve their stuff. And while they're getting out there, the gatekeeper and Zool, they go in. Well, Mr. Gruberson goes in. Actually, I guess this happened a little before he and the gatekeeper met up, but he destroyed the setup, stopping the portal from opening. So the portal's opening, the ghosts are all coming out. They got this great, looking minor zombie guy. Looks a little bit like the taxi cab guy from the original film, but obviously a different ghost. So all hell's breaking loose, which is the perfect time for the kids to sneak into the police station and grab their gear. They get the Ecto-1, going. And in terms of the proton pack and the traps and stuff, that's all been locked behind this super secure cell. They can't even pick the lock, but they get the brilliant idea to reach in and release the muncher from its trap, which promptly eats through the jail cell bars so they can get in to retrieve their stuff. So the Ecto-1 tears off down the road to head to the mine. They get there, Gozer, comes out, looking just like, they did back in 1984. And Ivo Shandor wakes up, and starts going on about how he wants to rule the world with Gozer. Gozer promptly rips him right in half down the middle from the top. Gozer's not having it. It's like, screw you, I can do this myself. So they managed to use the trap to get the Zool terror dog into it, freeing Callie from the possession, and they load her up into the Ecto-1 and tear off towards the farmhouse with Gozer and Vince Clortho in hot pursuit. They make it to the farmhouse, because they plan to use Egon's traps he laid under the dirt, which is why they were all calling him Dirt Farmer. They plan to use those to trap everything, but it doesn't seem to want to activate. During the ensuing chaos, the trap gets released again, and Lucky gets taken over by Zool. So they're trying to do this. They're trying to fire the proton gun from the Ecto-1's gunner seat, but that won't work because a bunch of mini puffs are wreaking havoc with the electrical systems. Things seem like they are just about hopeless when we get some familiar looking faces in some tan jumpsuits. That's right, guys. It's the original three Ghostbusters. Dr. Raymond Stans, Dr. Peter Venkman, and Winston Zedmore. They're back. They've got the same camaraderie, the same style. I mean, I love how Ray starts out with a similar speech as, Gozerian, though they make sure not to let Ray repeat his other mistake. Are you a god? Yes, I'm a god. We're all gods, in fact. I love that. You know, and of course, Peter's like, hey, Flat Top, remember us? You know, so the old guys, they start blasting, and then comes the gut punch of the movie. This is the big scene right here. This is the one that got us all. Egon Spengler materializes to fight beside his compadres. I don't know exactly how they did it. I'm assuming that they must have used some CGI wizardry. Maybe they had a body double. My only thing I would have loved to have heard would have been to have him speak. And I know people are thinking, but Harold Ramis is gone. There's no way that could happen. But if they had gotten Maurice LaMarche, they could have had it sound enough like Egon. But yeah, Ghost Egon busting one last time with the other three busters. He's there. He's holding Phoebe's proton wand, helping her to aim. And while this is going on, Podcast is trying to get rid of the mini puffs. He finally is able to get them off, repair the gunner seat, and they get the idea to shoot the proton streams at the big generator, which causes the system to start working. Callie hits the trap, and all the other ghosts that were there, Vince Clortho, Zool, Gozer, they're all sucked into the traps. They've all been captured. The end of the world has been stopped. Busters make a few good quips like, thanks for picking up the slack for us. You know, Podcast comes out covered in marshmallow goo, and, Trevor frees Lucky from the remnants of Vince Clortho, or not Vince Clortho, from the remnants of Zool. Mr. Gruberson's freed from Vince Clortho, and the Busters, they say their goodbyes to their fallen comrade, you know, as does Callie and Phoebe and Trevor, and then you know, then we get a shot of the Ecto One, with its sirens blazing, going down the Brooklyn Bridge as the logo comes, and we fade to the credits. But we're not quite done yet. There's a couple scenes in the credits. The first one is a wonderful little callback to the beginning of the original Ghostbusters, where Dana Barrett is using Peter Venkman's shock device on him, making him read the cards. He's actually pretty good at it, it seems, at first, until we realize he marked the cards, which is totally what Peter would do. Our other hidden scene in the credits starts with the deleted scene from the original Ghostbusters of Janine giving Egon her lucky coin, and it's cleaned up very nice for inclusion in this movie. And then we get present day Janine talking to Winston. Winston's very successful. Started his own business. He's been paying the mortgage on Ray's occult. It's implied that he actually owns the firehouse, which is a little strange because I thought they said that it had been turned into a Starbucks, but I guess it wasn't. you know, but, you know, he opens the firehouse doors, leads the Ecto 1, you know, the Ecto 1 pulls back in, but then we get a shot of the containment unit, and there was a blinking red light on it, which I believe is going to lead into a sequel. This movie was amazing, though. There's so many callbacks. There's even ones I didn't mention in my rundown, like when Phoebe finds Egon's flight suit, and there's a half-eaten Crunch bar in it. There's a Twinkie in the Ecto One's glove compartment. You know, it's such a great movie. Is it completely perfect? Not completely. It's damn near perfect, though. There are some things I would have done. I mean, obviously, some things I know they probably couldn't do because of not being able to get certain people. Like, I would have loved to have seen Lewis again. That would have been a nice little nod. More than that, though, I wish they had respected Ghostbusters 2 a bit more. Like, don't get me wrong, I love the original Ecto 1, but the last we saw, they were using the Ecto 1A. So it leads me to question, where was the Ecto 1A? Why was the Ecto featured in this movie not that? And if there's an in-universe explanation, that'd be fine, but we'd like to hear it, because as far as I can tell, it does not appear that the events of the video game are being taken into this canon. Now, they could be. I mean, they didn't really talk about the events of the second movie, so it's possible that they had the Ecto 1B in this universe. It's also possible that the IDW comics were considered canon, at which point, I think at one point in those, they switched back to the Ecto 1, but I'm not entirely sure. Other things I would have liked to have seen, though, I would have loved to have seen Oscar Barrett in this, because he he was a big part of the second movie. They either could have gotten the remaining sibling that played in in Ghostbusters 2. I believe that was Will uh, Dorsch. I'm probably gonna butcher the name a bit. Will Dustendorf. He's around. They could have had him play a grown-up Oscar, or they could have recast Oscar as a grown-up. It is, they could have done that. I would have liked to have seen maybe a little more, maybe heard a little more info about what happened to Janosch, what happened to Peck, and where was Slimer? We saw Slimer in Ghostbusters 2, so, you know, it would have been nice to have seen Slimer, and that's something they could have just CG'd him somewhere into the movie. I mean, just a little more acknowledgement of the events of Ghostbusters 2 would have been good to have. I mean, the Raise a Cult reference was awesome, don't get me wrong, but it just feels like they just glossed over anything to do with the sequel, even though Ghostbusters 2 is awesome, you know? But, you know, other than that, I think I would have liked to have had a little more storytelling. I think there was a lot of references and callbacks, but I think there were parts that needed to be expanded upon a bit more. Like getting to see a little more of Trevor and Lucky's story, because they mostly focused on the journey of Podcast and Phoebe. Now, Phoebe, obviously, I can understand for sure, because, she's, the driving force behind the movie. In terms of characters, new characters, my favorite has to be Phoebe. She steals the show. Uh, the mom, Callie's pretty awesome. Mr. Gruberson nails it, as the quirky fanboy. podcast was pretty interesting. I love that bit at the end that, Ray is actually, he watches his podcast. That was a nice little bit. I do wish we had maybe gotten a little more of the old school Busters, but I can understand why they didn't, have them until just the very end. But if they do make a sequel to this, I want it to focus on the new characters. Like, I would love to maybe see Winston, Peter, and Ray maybe take a mentorship role. Maybe at the beginning help explain a few things, teach them the ins and outs. But I would hope by the end of the next one, the new team will be established as their own busting, unit, able to do things. I'd also love to see them maybe branch out into franchises, because who's to say that we have to stick with one group of Ghostbusters? That was one of the best things in early Ghostbusters lore, was the idea of other franchises, because there's cities and all over the world that probably have ghost problems. So aside from the ones in New York, who's to say you couldn't have a group of busters stationed in San Francisco? I mean, how cool would it be to see, like rivers of slime dripping from like the Golden Gate Bridge, or maybe have the Sphinx come to life in Egypt and have a group of Egyptian busters have to deal with it. That would be sweet. But needless to say, I've been fanboying out this entire time. I really want to see the movie again, and I will say I'm sorry if I've missed any parts of this movie. Like I said, I only watched it once. I'm going based on my memory, but to quote Ray, man, what a ride. But I hope you've enjoyed this review. I do highly recommend going to see the new Ghostbusters, in the theater if you can. If not, once it's available on home media, you should definitely check it out then. Hope you've liked this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and watch for whatever I got coming next. This has been DMC Jedi Man, and bustin' makes me feel good.